Toledo Choral Society is equipped with some pretty good musicians.
To be a part of a chorus, there's actually, I believe, something physiologically that happens.
It's the kind of thing that keep you going. I mean, in life, it makes a big difference.
I think it's a true testimony of what Toledo has to offer its community. We've got a great art museum. We've got a great musical tradition. We've got a great Toledo Symphony Orchestra. So I think that's just, it's part of our cultural heritage here in Toledo.
For over a century, the Toledo Choral Society has continuously brought high-quality professional choral music to Toledo and the surrounding area. Even before the organization's official beginning of 1919, the people and pieces were already in place to weave the Choral Society into the very fabric of the city of Toledo.
Toledo Choral Society has its roots back with the Toledo Vocal Society, and then it became at one point the Toledo Oratorio Society under the direction of Herbert Foster Sprague, at which point, after he decided to bow out, it went dormant for a while and then was restarted at the Toledo Choral Society in 1919.
With the reorganization of the group in 1919, it became necessary to select a new music director and conductor to lead the organization. Democratic from the onset, the Choral Society held an election to decide on the role. Of the 7 candidates, including 6 men, the group elected Miss Mary Willing.
She had quite a musical upbringing. Her father was very famous in the Toledo circles with music and instruction and writing, composition. She taught piano and she taught classes in a school. She just was very accomplished musically, and it just fit with her talents that she had at that time to be able to transform it into, being a conductor. And that, I'm sure, contributed to her being chosen so that she could be the first director.
She was an amazing woman, absolutely amazing. This was an age when women didn't do things like direct orchestras and large groups. She did. She always let people know that she studied with Frederick Stock, who directed the Chicago Symphony. She didn't actually study with him, she finally told me. She rode the train to Chicago and attended the rehearsals. And Stock was very nice to her, but he didn't take her on as a student. So that's how she became a conductor.
Typical for the time or not, Mary Willing asserted herself as a force in the music scene of Toledo and beyond. She set to building the Choral Society with a tenacity that saw its initial 100-person membership grow to over 400 registered singers by 1925.
People had more time back then to participate. They were looking for things to do a lot of times, and so it was something that people just wanted to be a part of.
I was with the Toledo Choral Society many years ago when Mary Willing was it. She was strict, but that didn't mean anything to me. I just wanted to do what she wanted, She just wanted things to be just right, and so she just stomped her foot a little bit, and do it, kind of do it her way, and we did. She just didn't mess around with things, she did them.
The auditions were tough. The background was checked, as well as the present singing ability. Many people didn't make it, in the early years especially.
My impression is that her method was strict and that she was a taskmaster when it came to directing and expecting things from the Choral Society, which is what made her so popular, which I think helped to get it to the point where it blossomed to almost 400 members.
She managed the rehearsals beautifully. She was meticulous, and this was an age when the chorus was concerned not only with quality of performance, but also with appearance, and everything was formal. A cousin of hers measured chorus members so that when they appeared on stage, they were graduated just so.
Along with the director, the Choral Society had another cornerstone to help anchor the organization for decades to come. Beginning first as a substitute in 1936, Margaret Weber served as the Choral Society's accompanist for over 60 years.
I was a student in composition and organ with Mary Willing. So it was natural, I think, that she used me as accompanist.
Margaret was a very good accompanist. I remember having these little scores, they were tiny little notes on them.
I played usually from a small miniature full score. And with 4 manuals, the music was up here somewhere. And this tiny little score wasn't easy to read, but I managed. However, in raising the money for orchestra, sometimes we lacked certain instruments. So Mary Willing would call me and say, something like, I can't get a second horn anywhere. You'll have to fill in that part from your score. Now don't forget to transpose it. It was quite a chore that I had accompanying the group at that time. When I first started, we were the chorus in the city. It was the only one doing large works like that. So we had usually full house.
People looking for entertainment at that time found that the Choral Society was a reasonable expense for them and their families. It was not very expensive to take your whole family to see the concerts.
We had some very beautiful performances, I think. She would raise money to bring orchestras here. She brought Chicago Symphony and Detroit various orchestras because Toledo Symphony was just in its infancy, really. The chorus did great works like the Brahms Requiem and Mozart Masses and Bach cantatas that would not have been heard in Toledo otherwise. We had problems about places to perform.
The very first concert was at Scott High School in the auditorium because the Choral Society was smaller at the time and the orchestra fit on that stage and also the members in the audience. By the second year, they had gone on to another location called the Coliseum. Several of the problems they had was not just finding space for the members on the stage, it was finding room for them all in an auditorium.
There was one time we had to schedule an extra, I think it was a 3rd performance of something, because people were so anxious to come. As we found it available, we used the auditorium at the Toledo Museum of Art. That auditorium no longer exists. And then, of course, the peristyle was the answer to our prayers. And we were there for performances for many, many years.
Of all the performances given in the peristyle, perhaps none are so fondly recalled or well known as the Choral Society's performance of Handel's Messiah. The annual performance began under Mary Willing's direction, but has become a Toledo tradition, a century in the making.
Well, I'm sure it's a staple for the audience. It's been a Toledo tradition for many years.
I remember my first performance of Handel's Messiah. That was the first piece that I did with the group, and it was just so moving. I remember having goosebumps.
My most memorable experience with the Messiah was actually going every year. If I wasn't singing in it, I was going to the concerts before anyway to watch my dad perform. But I always remember this tenor soloist that we used to have. R.D. Matthey was the professor at Bowling Green State University. And every year I used to go wait and listen for him to sing Comfort Ye in Every Valley.
was his tenor soloist for probably 15 to 20 messiahs. People go to hear it because of the tradition and because they understand it. Each time they go, they hear something new and something refreshing. It becomes inspirational, yeah.
Singing Handel's Messiah with an orchestra is the kind of thing that even if you've done it 10, 15 times, you still get the chills up and down your spine when you sing certain parts of it. When we first did this at the Peristyle, there was the big organ, and they used the big organ.
The use of the organ was always a problem. There were purists who said it shouldn't be used. It should just be orchestra and harpsichord. Mary Willing didn't look at it that way, and so I was encouraged to let it roar sometimes. The one that sticks in my memory the most was Mary's final concert. She insisted on doing the absolutely complete Messiah. And of course, with the length of it, we always cut parts of it. Every chorus does that, otherwise, you know, you're there forever. But Mary insisted that for her final performance, she wanted to have it absolutely complete. So the performance went on and on, but it was a good thing to do.
After nearly 35 years as the Choral Society's director, Mary Willing stepped down from the position in late 1953. She was later named Director Emeritus and continued to support the organization until her passing in 1968. In February 1954, the Choral Society elected its second director, Lester McCoy.
Lester McCoy came from the University of Michigan, and several of the changes that happened under his tenure were more professional in that he incorporated the Choral Society. He added the fact that the director was being paid. At that point, they were able to solicit fundraising from corporations and individuals to help pay for some of the expenses. The Choral Society was competing directly with many of the other professional organizations at the time, the Toledo Symphony, the other choral societies that were in town. It would have been more difficult to keep funding the growth that they've experienced over the years without that initial change. With the change by Lester McCoy to a paid director, some financial hardships were created for the Choral Society, coming up with the funds to pay him, and there was a period of time where he was not paid for his time, and at some point after 4 years he did offer his resignation.
Citing additional duties in Ann Arbor, Lester McCoy tendered his resignation as the organization's director in early 1958. By April of 1958, the group had elected their third director, who would go on to serve the Choral Society for 53 years, Samuel P. Zohr.
I had known him, you know, as everybody in the city knew Sam. It was an entirely different approach from what I had in the earlier years. Mary was strict disciplinarian. Sam made it more approachable for the singers and the audience, with really fine musicianship behind it, but he could tell jokes in the rehearsals and parties. And I think he was very, very good for the chorus at a time when they needed that.
He was unique in everything he did. He paved his own way. He didn't do things like everybody else. And sometimes there were a few people who were distressed by that, but for most people it was acceptable and enjoyable.
I really always admired his musicianship. He was a dynamic director, and he wasn't necessarily a singer himself, but he really pulled the music out of us, and you just felt like you wanted to give your all. And I thought Sam was very inspiring in that way.
He not only directed us, he taught us as he was directing us.
Under Zohr's leadership, the Choral Society entered a period that was, while still professional, much more relaxed than previous years. With less membership, auditions became less rigorous. Zohr's rehearsals maintained a serious approach, albeit with more humor and lightheartedness than his predecessors.
Back then, the audition was really not too intimidating. I think we did a vocal range, and then we had to sing My Country 'Tis of Thee.
And they were more interested in looking to which section you might be treated or be best suited for.
He expected the non-professionals to come up to the level of the professionals. He made no variance from what I could see. He just assumed that since you're singing in the Toledo Choral Society and you were accepted in this group, you have certain requirements and expectations.
If we were working on something and it was getting a little difficult and some of the people were getting restless, I'm going to tell you a little story.
Sam used to always have some great stories to tell. In fact, he had some stories that he told over and over at different rehearsals. So we started numbering his jokes. And when he'd tell a joke at rehearsal, we'd say, oh, there goes number 12, or that's number 7, or whatever.
But it was fun. He just had a really jovial way of getting people to do what he was wanting out of the music.
Most of the time, it was just great fun. He told wonderful jokes, and it was great fun until you got to about the week before the concert. And then it got to be all seriousness.
He never went to rehearsal without having a lesson plan. Every single rehearsal. He knew where he was going to start, what he was going to rehearse, and how much he was going to accomplish.
One trait that Sam Zor had that I really got to see was he never went from the first page 1 to page 16. He'd start back on page 16 or 15, about 12 bars from the end, and he'd always rehearse the end, then he'd go back and rehearse the beginning.
It's called backwards chaining. So we would start at the back and work our way and tackle all of the difficult places. And then when we got to the front, we could sing the whole thing because we knew it all.
When he was directing the symphony for the Messiah, when he was actually directing it, he just was in charge. That was always so impressive to me. And I always thought it was kind of cute the way he kind of danced around. I got into the music.
Sam was an entertainer on the podium, and the audience was pleased with him. What they failed to observe was that what he was doing with his baton was dead center on target. He knew what he was doing.
He was very serious about the music, always, no matter what it was. He wanted to do justice to the music as the composer intended it to be.
Zor's love and appreciation of the music he selected was only amplified by the response of the singers themselves. Over 5 decades, the chorus covered a broad range of masterworks to contemporary pieces, always with a serious approach and leaving a lasting impact on the singers and audience alike.
Sam always did major works. We did a lot of Brahms, we did a lot of all the Rutter Requiems, and I remember the first time I sang Rutter Gloria, because at the very end of it, the tenors go up this glorious high B flat. And I remember singing it, and it was so exhilarating to be able to do that.
The Chichester Psalms, I had never tried to sing anything in any other language except English or Latin, and that was a challenge. But I really liked that music. Not one piece, but many of the pieces that are what you would call the standard classics. I would hear them later on the radio or somewhere, and I'd say, oh, I sing that. I know that song. Or something would come on the radio, and I said, what's that from? I know it. But for me, just little old me, to be able to say, I have sung that. Just to me, it's just, I guess it's a personal goal. He always led us in the classics like we were just talking about, but he'd come up with some new music every now and then.
Sam was always on the cutting edge of new things that were out. I remember when Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote his Requiem. It was kind of a difficult work for the Choral Society, but he always liked to keep himself current. He just felt that since he had the Toledo Choral Society, I think that he felt that he could move mountains.
We even did a piece that our accompanist, Margaret Weber, wrote, but it was quite challenging and very modern.
I don't know whose idea it was, Sam or somebody else, to do a Weber concert. So we did Carl Maria von Weber, Andrew Lloyd Webber, and Margaret Weber. At that concert they did my 3 sonnets of John Donne. And I'm sure they enjoyed the Andrew Lloyd Webber the most.
We did a couple different concerts with Bud Kerwin, who was part of the Kerwin Ballet in Toledo for years. We did Carmina Burana with him, which is a really super choral piece, and then to add his ballet group with it was really a very interesting undertaking.
You didn't come in contact with the dancers until the dress rehearsal. The same way with the orchestra. We never practiced with the orchestra until the dress rehearsal. And you just zoomed through and you expected they were going to be professional and everything was going to go very well. And that's how it usually did.
While Zohr and other directors may have hired professional musicians to participate in performances, the chorus itself has always remained entirely volunteer-based. Singers come from many walks of life and give of their own personal time and efforts to make each and every performance a success.
As members of the Choral Society, we all put in a lot of hard work and our own personal time into making these concerts enjoyable.
I mean, there are a few people in there now that have been lifelong friends that I met in Choral Society, and we're still friends and still sing together, most of us. So it's something I wouldn't trade and never regret having done with my life.
To me, it was an honor to be a part of it. The main thing is, having a good time. If you don't have a good time, you don't want to be a part of anything.
When I went to the Choral Society rehearsals after a hard day's work, I could relax. And even though you were working on music, it was a different venue, and you just tended to relax and enjoy the singing, even though you had to sing the same words over and over and over until they were right.
There are times at the end of our rehearsals when we're asked if we have time for one more piece, and of course we all agree to it because that's what makes us what we are. We enjoy being there, and of course we'll take the time.
As the years progressed and the world changed, the Choral Society saw the effects that modern life had on the organization. During the last decades of the 20th century, membership overall had begun to stagnate and eventually drop, and financing became an ever-increasing challenge. By the late 2000s, it became apparent that another big change was coming to the group. Echoing Mary Willing's final performance as conductor, in December of 2011, Sam Zohr conducted the Choral Society in the annual Messiah for the very last time. Since 2012, the Choral Society has been under the direction of the group's 4th music director, Richard J. Naparella, who will take the chorus into their 100th season. Under his leadership, the organization has focused on increasing membership, expanding its repertoire and seasonal concerts, and approaching new goals like commissioning original choral compositions.
When you come into this position and you realize the amount of history that this organization has in Toledo. It is Toledo's oldest continuous running music organization. There's a weight to making sure that that legacy continues. I mean, I think when I took over, there was probably 35, 40 members left. Now we're back up over 100. And it's something that, you know, as with anything, you know, you don't ever want to see anything go away that's great, especially in your own community.
The biggest thing is you want to keep it going, and you want to do what it takes to keep it going. There were times where they had some really rough times financially. I guess the big thing with us is the friendship that we all have toward one another, and we all strive towards a common goal.
People who have that passion are what make it easy for the Choral Society to continue and to continue to grow.
I feel that I was blessed with it, really, and blessed to know people in the chorus and soloists who were with them, but also Mary and Sam. What I contributed, I don't know. I'm not the judge of that, but it was a good life.
Support for Toledo Choral Society, the first 100 years, is provided by the Toledo Choral Society and by viewers like you. Thank you.